Goldman Sachs, the bank that rules the world. This documentary about the Goldman Sachs network demonstrates how politics are infiltrated by the financial elite and how the entire world is being driven into financial ruin for the benefit of a few money barons.
Goldman Sachs, eine Bank lenkt die
Already on November 13, 2012, the German TV channel ZDF aired a highly revealing and enlightening program with the alarming title Goldman Sachs, the bank that rules the world. But what has happened since then? In summary, nothing at all. Viewers of Klar TV are wondering why. The answer seems to be simple. As long as dramatic truths are broadcasted in the context of an entertainment show, the public is amused and laughs, but there are no reactions beyond that. In serious hope of an intervention by the prosecution authorities, one of our viewers sent in a complaint based on the data broadcasted 2012 by ZDF TV. Quite obviously, the issue is not a conspiracy theory, but clearly it is a matter of facts about real conspiracy. No longer should financial or power interests stand above the good of the people. No longer should the entire world be driven into financial ruin in favor of a few power-hungry tycoons. But see for yourself, what kind of sinister network was already revealed in 2012. The legitimate question arises, why have neither public prosecution authorities nor officers for the protection of the constitution or the state become active so far? Are they also part of this ruinous network?
News from the Asylum, November 13, 2012, The Banana Republic, aired by the German TV channel ZDF. When Barack Obama was re-elected, many people hoped that maybe a new era had begun, where after all big money would not be ruling. After all, Wall Street, the financial industry, and the banks had supported Mitt Romney, investing many billions in his campaign. Nonetheless, as if by magic, it was Obama who ascended to the throne. Before you give rise to false hopes, this documentary should prove that there is no reason for optimism, because for a bank like Goldman Sachs, it really does not matter who is playing, for the time being, the role of the American president. Why is this? Quite simply, the reason is Goldman Sachs has enough players within their network. Goldman Sachs has always been a great winner in times of crisis, able over and over again to show multi-billion quarterly profits. The US head of Goldman Sachs, Lloyd Blankfein, grew up in the Bronx, and therefore he understands quite well how to outmaneuver others. Head of the German Goldman Sachs branch is Alexander Dibellis. The chairman of the international business branch of Goldman Sachs is the Irishman Peter Sutherland, a former AU commissioner and member of the Trilateral Commission, which is a small private political consulting group in Washington. The 300 to 400 members of the Trilateral Commission are very powerful people, such as Lucas Papademos, the former Greek interim head of state, or until recently, the Italian Prime Minister Mario Monti. Beyond that, what connects Monti and Papademos? Would you believe it? Both used to work for Goldman Sachs. Moreover, also, Paul Wolfowitz is a member of the Trilateral Commission. Paul Wolfowitz used to be the president of the World Bank, but then he had to resign from his position on account of a well-paid job deal that favored his girlfriend. Robert Zoellick became his successor. And where was he previously? Right with Goldman Sachs. But Zoellick should not be confused with the chairman of the German Bishops' Conference, Robert Zollitz, who is also an integral part of this network. Peter Sutherland was not only chairman of the board of Goldman Sachs and the Trilateral Commission, but he was also a consulate for the administration of the patrimony of the Apostolic See, headquartered in Rome, where Robert Zollitz may also be found. Goldman Sachs has many more interesting connections. Example, Petros Christodoulou, who became head of the Greek debt agency. He also worked for Goldman Sachs. And Charles-Henri de Croisset, who was with Goldman Sachs for 7 years and subsequently monitored the French financial markets. Also Philip D. Murphy with Goldman Sachs for 23 years, who following this became U.S. ambassador in Berlin. Philip D. Murphy was also a member of the Atlantic Bridge Association. The Atlantic Bridge is a German-American network of elites. Members are politicians, financial sharks, and journalists acting jointly as a think tank. These people also take care of the political leaders of the future with their young leadership promotional programs. Persons who profited from the Atlantic Bridge are, for example, Sem Ozdemir or Julia Klockner of the CDU, but also Christian Wolff, former president of Germany, and Silvana Koch-Marin have been promoted by the Atlantic Bridge. Furthermore, members of the Atlantic Bridge are the head of Goldman Sachs Germany, Alexander Debelius, and Chancellor Angela Merkel, who in turn is advised directly by Alexander Debelius. And here we find Robert Rubin. He used to be Bill Clinton's Minister of Finance. Where did he come from? Right, Goldman Sachs. What did Robert Rubin do afterwards? He advised Timothy Geithner in 2012 U.S. Secretary of Treasury and former head of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. However, Geithner was in his office only until January 2013, as Geithner himself never was an associate of Goldman Sachs. He had a very close collaborator, Mark Patterson. Where did Mark Patterson come from? He came from Goldman Sachs. Apart from that, Timothy Geithner was also a member of the Trilateral Commission and a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. The Council on Foreign Relations is one of the most powerful think tanks worldwide. There are 3,000 to 4,000 really powerful masterminds who deliberately help design the future of the world in their proceedings. Who pays them all? Where does the money for the council come from? Among others, it comes from Goldman Sachs. In 2012, also Henry Paulson was a member of the Council of Foreign Relations. Prior to this, he was a Minister of Finance for George W. Bush, and before this, he was the top director of Goldman Sachs. Therefore, Paulson was well connected with E. Gerald Corrigan. Corrigan was the head of the Federal Reserve Bank before he moved to Goldman Sachs. At the same time, he was a member of the Council on Foreign Relations and a member of the Group of the 30. The Group of 30 is a high-end club of the financial elite to whom Corrigan belongs. Who else can we find in the Group of 30? Mario Draghi. Mario Draghi too comes from Goldman Sachs. Subsequently, he became head of the European Central Bank. Also, the German Ottmar Issing, a longtime chief economist and consultant for Chancellor Merkel, used to work for the ECB. After this, Ottmar Issing provided consulting to Goldman Sachs, and therefore Issing is connected with Jean-Claude Trichet, Draghi's predecessor. Trichet was also a member of the Group of 30, as well as of the Trilateral Commission. That's why he knows Lucas Papademos as well as Mario Monti. Here everybody knows everybody. Also, Robert Zoellick and a number of other well-known political persons could be identified as members of the Trilateral Commission and the Group of 30.
If politics are infiltrated to such an extent by the financial elite, one should not wonder when nations are not governed to their advantage, but instead in favor of ruthlessly rampant speculators and business leaders. In view of the continuous losses in national wealth running in the billions caused by such big speculators from the perspective of a citizen, this must be considered as an ongoing serious major crime. But which authority will put an end to such parasites to the people if there is no prosecution office, state protection office, or a higher court that would be ready to do the job? Absolute transparency must be established. The people have a right to know which one of their politicians is part of which board of directors and who is in a business relation with whom. Ongoing capital offenses like major financial crimes, prejudice, or high-grade conflicts of interest seem to be just the tip of an iceberg. Visit Klar TV again, stay tuned and spread these broadcasts so that more and more awareness is created and these networks can be brought to the light.